Ruins uncovered on Mercury? Connection to Bernard Star? Politicians promise security for the colonies with the announcement that new construction will begin to field another military carrier strike group ready to protect and serve. Private industry now takes control in space mining, with the sector increasing in size by over 50% in the last quarter alone. Second Earth discovered in the system of Proxima Centauri. Captain Ephraim Peevel's report finds a world ripe for colonization within the system. The United Terran Navy announces the deployment of new patrols to defend the now bustling shipping lanes to the frontier. The light carrier Galactica enters service as it is newly commissioned into the Navy. It will undergo space trials before entering its first operational deployment sometime within the next year. Hello and welcome back to the next episode of PAX Americana Aurora 4X. If you are enjoying the content, do must leave a like, comment and subscribe, and if you want to play along, in the description you can join the Discord and find all the relevant information there. So we start out, and the main thing that I'm going to be focusing on in this episode, and kind of the overarching theme, is going to be the establishment of permanent patrols between our new colonies, as well as finally outfitting them to be really able to support initial defense capability. So that means each of our frontier colonies should be able to support at least 5 corvettes over the actual world itself, and also frigates that can patrol between the colony and between Earth itself every year over multiple different patrol paths over a certain period of time. And once we have that in place, we'll be able to actually start sending our exploration ships out to do further missions into new systems to find new resources and new capabilities to kind of tell us where we need to expand into. We still have an unexplored jump point in Sol, for example, which is a pretty big deal. And that's why currently I'm not really doing anything with our current exploration ships besides just survey what we've already explored in terms of systems. Such as the UTS Danube that just finished up and whatnot. I'm also glad that you guys have been saying that you've been enjoying the commentary after the fact, it kind of really does speed up and make sure that what you're actually watching is quite interesting and kind of summarize. I know a lot of people like to watch this stuff as a podcast. I mean, Aurora is not a very graphically intensive game, and so you don't really need to see what's happening if you've got someone talking about it. You're not really missing out on much. Over here, I'm telling one of our exploration ships, that's one of its tasks, because it's not doing anything else, to launch buoys to each of the jump points that are within our systems, so that we have full information about who enters and who leaves through each jump point. And so we've got the Danube there, I think, being sent to go and do that job specifically. We've also been expanding out our freighter fleet. We've got 4 new freighters, the Genoa, Hiroshima, Mons, and Novgorod, who I'm going to be assigning up to a new freighter fleet. And with those, we're going to be moving maintenance facilities to Horatio. And those will be needed, of course, to maintain further military presence on the world. We're going to send about 16 facilities total, and that'll be able to support a good number, about 25,000 tons of capacity on that world in particular. Since most of our ships, it's been about 5 years since game start, most of our exploration ships have now come back after overhauling for about a year, and so they're now ready for their second deployment. Now, in terms of actually keeping ships around for periods of time, because I play low research rate, the really cool thing about low research rate is that you can keep ships in service, and you kind of have to keep ships in service for decades and decades and decades, a bit like how in real life, the United States military doesn't throw away their massive nuclear carriers every 5 years. They keep them around for 40, 50 years even. I think the USS Nimitz is from the 1970s, and that's still in service, with the newer generation Gerald R. Ford coming into service in the 21st century, and that will be expected to serve into the 2050s and 2060s. So you keep those long lead items, and you keep those ships in service, you refit them, you do grade them over time, and that's kind of what we're going to have to do here. And so, for these exploration ships, they may be in service until the 21st century for us. So, we're talking, maybe early 2005, 2010 kind of area. So here we are, we're sending up the frigate squadrons and corvette squadrons to get them moved around. I'm considering, okay, how am I going to do patrols? How am I going to do other things? But the first step is going to be moving over the corvette patrol squadrons and setting up their organization. So we've done that with the corvette patrol squadron 1. I'm also checking out my current industrial situation, and I ordered up a couple more frigates because I realized we're going to need more if I'm planning to have multiple patrols in multiple different areas at once. So as you can see here, New Eden is now maintaining 5 corvettes, the Cudgel, Missile, Quiver, and Stave, as well as the Sword. And those will provide protection against limited interference. Corvettes, they have 8 missiles each. Size 8 missiles. That gives a total capacity of about 40 missiles capable. And that'll be enough to kill 2 to 3 ships, but nothing more than that. We also start to begin to transfer maintenance supplies to the frontier colonies, because obviously we need to provide those supplies. Without doing that, those ships won't actually be maintained. And so what we will need to be doing, logistically speaking, is setting up regular intervals where we start transporting maintenance supplies, fuel supplies, and ordnance to the frontier colonies as needed. Ordnance is a little different because it's going to be on a use-by-use basis, and it depends. It depends really on what we need, right? Of course, you're not going to be using ordnance constantly like you are maintenance supplies of fuel, so it's a bit different. And so we offload the first batch of maintenance supplies to New Eden, and we also start sending our maintenance supplies to Horatio military base as well. We create the Colonial Defense Force, Forces Lalanid 21185, and that will have its own corvette squadron assigned. And its job will be the protection. So the Mine, Winchester, Helmet, Napalm, and Howitzer, the 5 corvettes assigned, and again they'll be protecting the 1 million people that now live on Horatio military base. And as I kind of go through the process of thinking about, okay, how are we going to defend these areas? We need to set up these patrols. We need all this. I think to myself, okay, we're probably going to eventually need surface to orbit weapons. And we're also probably going to need orbital defense bases, because our primary offensive capability, and even defensive capability, is our fighters. And so that is going to be something we're going to be looking at a little bit later into the episode, of course. The Pacific Ocean actually finishes up its job of setting up these buoys, and you can see them on the screen there for a little second. And that will then obviously provide us with early warning detection, because remember, there are still those 3 alien NPRs out there, and any one of these jump points, alien ships could start busting through, and we need to be aware if that happens to be able to respond immediately, because majority of our fleet, about 90% of our fleet at the moment, is stationed on Earth and ready to move if it is so required. We have 3 carrier strike groups ready to do so, with their associated destroyers as well. And as you can also see, the traffic between both Lalanid and Seoul and Signy and Seoul has really increased as civilians start moving supplies back and forth, and as we start moving supplies back and forth. And that's what really concerns me, is the potential for an attack on this kind of shipping lane. And that's why we haven't explored any further, because I don't want to trigger an immediate threat that we'll have to deal with. But we're starting to get our frigate squadrons and patrol squadrons in place, and these frigates will be used to patrol between Earth to the jump point, and then to the jump point to New Eden or to Horatio, and they will provide a immediate quick response force in case anything happens, as well as just being around to thwart threats, right? Because a lot of the use of defense, of patrols, of this kind of stuff is not only just actually destroying the enemy when they attack, but also to ward them off, right? We want to discourage the attacks on our shipping as much as we humanly can. Of course, it's not always going to work, and as you can see here, I'm setting up the Patrol Squadron 1's orders. There was a bit of kerfuffle with about exactly how it would work out, So I'm using order delay, and I'm also going to use cycle move orders. I wasn't sure if cycle move orders would actually work with a long chain of commands, because I do go for quite a long chain here. But as far as I understand, it seems to have worked. The one thing that we will need to be implementing for this, however, is going to be a secondary relief squadron. So what will have happen is every year, this patrol squadron will overhaul and finish off its patrol and have shore leave. So every year it will do shore leave. And then we need a second squadron to then relieve it and then alternate between, okay? And this will give our crew shore leave. It will also mean that we've always got ships out there patrolling as needed. And these are all really, really important things to do. And as you can see here, that's the kind of orders we got set up. So basically, 30 days, we stay at one place for 30 days, stay at another place for 30 days, stay at another place for 30 days. We have our sensors on, we're active, and again, each one of these ships has access to 32 size 4 missiles, which means that a patrol has enough ordnance to destroy 2 to 4 ships that we're expecting to see, right? So that is their primary job. If they come up against a concerted large force, they are likely not going to be able to hold out. However, they can of course delay the enemy until we can get reinforcements of our larger ships, our destroyers, our carriers, our cruisers potentially, into combat. And so we set up the same thing for Horatio to get those frigates moving accordingly. And this is kind of how I really like to set up the overall defense. I know a lot of people like to use surface orbit weapons really, really leisurely. But I always feel that defending these shipping lanes is the biggest problem, because a threat could appear, destroy multiple ships, and it can really throw your supply lines into chaos, right? We only have a limited freighter fleet, and our civilians are in quite low numbers at the moment, so we have to always consider that. Any significant losses to that is going to really hurt us in terms of exploring outwards. And remember, Aurora is a game of snowball, which means that the more you have, the quicker you can get to more, and the more you have, the quicker you can get to more, right? So as you get more, the quicker it gets. And so you got to keep that in mind. And just now, Sol was finally gravitationally surveyed, which is pretty funny when you think about it, considering how many years it's been. It's been 6 years or 7 years at this point. Yeah, 6 years, I think. Which is quite hilarious. As you can see there, the Frigate Squadron 1 is currently at the jump point, and it's moving back and forth between New Eden and the Solar jump point, and refueling and resupplying at both ends, able to ensure that it can keep up its duty. And again, that is providing that deterrence, and it's also providing that quick reaction force of, okay, we've got a threat coming in, but we've got those frigates that are coming back and forth every so often. And remember, they go about 4,500 kilometers per second, so they're the fastest ship in our fleet besides our fighters. We discovered the system of 61 Hydra, a lot of empty systems. About 50% of the systems are empty, and then maybe 10%, 5% actually have stuff that we care about. And so there's always more dead space than there is useful things in exploration. But we are going to make some real concerted efforts in our exploration today and really find some very interesting things. We're also making sure our fuel harvesters are set up correctly. So far, the system has worked pretty brilliantly, and that means that both New Eden and Horatio are actually sitting at really nice fuel levels, and harvesting has gone off without a hitch. I am considering also expanding that harvesting, but so far, fuel has not been much of an issue. We'll need to take account of the new ships being built and how much that will affect our fuel supplies. How long can our strike groups go without running out of all of our fuel, right? Because it costs a lot to, have a big expeditionary force and have that running, and it uses a lot of fuel, a lot of maintenance supplies, and a lot of ordnance. These are all things that, logistically speaking, cause quite a headache for the paper pushers at home. So, yeah, again, we can see here that I was trying to test it to see if it was working as I expected. It kind of is, as far as I could see. And we have here the larger Frigate Patrol Squadron, Arnheim, Kochi, and the Trafalgar of Frigate Patrol Squadron 2. And they are patrolling between the military base at Horatio and Seoul, of course. Once we go farther out, we will either need to outfit our corvettes or frigates to be more longer range, or we will start using destroyers for patrol missions. And I also want to set up checkpoints and defense way stations between systems for refueling and safe harbor, as well as just monitoring ships that are coming in and out of system. A bit like in Omniverse, if you know what that is, where you have checkpoint stations at the local areas between the systems that kind of monitor the traffic coming in and out, and they're usually run by private corporations, so they're commercial-based interests. And again, this is where most of my focus is making sure that the actual system that I've set up here in regards to cycling the orders actually works, because it can be quite complicated and could cause quite a lot of issues for sure. But now with those patrols in place, I decide, okay, now we can continue our exploration into the galaxy, and find new planets and resources to build our way towards. We discovered the system of Gamma Carinae with one single planet of a terrestrial world, nothing too important to think about. As you can see here, our civilian mining industry has actually really taken off, and we're using a lot of those minerals at the moment to transport back to Earth to help supplement the costs of financing new additional carriers and new additional shipping, as we're currently building a new carrier strike group. We are also expanding our industry out here on the first planet of 61 Cygni, where there's a lot of resources. I want to ship those to New Eden, and then potentially what I want to do is start a local construction sector on the planet, and also ship some of the resources back to Earth as well, and that will allow us to start building maintenance supplies potentially on New Eden without having to ship them in from Earth, which will both save on fuel and will also save on cost to Earth industry. Mars here at 10 million population, which I'm going to set to stable, and New Eden reaching a milestone of 3 million people living on the world. We're also looking at our buildings. We're building up our military presence after those aliens we saw in Bernard's star as a potential threat. I'm thinking that we're going to probably wait a generation of technology before we consider a move against those aliens, and I'm also considering that we're going to need, I would say, maybe 6 carriers before I decide to make such a move to take that system. There's no reason to go in there yet, unless besides just defending ourselves. So what I may do is reprioritize industry to make defensive capability to ensure that nothing can come through that jump point without shortly exploding. So we still up auto assignments. And I'm also going to rename the base to Nelson. You can see kind of a theme here for my military bases. So Horatio Nelson or Nelson, different kinds of British admirals, or the same British admiral in fact. And I've also kind of stopped ground force construction because I'm waiting for this. I'm going to start building some surface door weapons. Now we only have 12cm lasers, but they'll do the job for now. And I'm also going to start building some point defense weapons, and what my plan is to design these elements and then put them into a formation I'm going to call the prefabricated planetary defense outpost. Essentially, what we're going to create is maybe a 25,000 ton formation, or hierarchy that is going to have surface to orbit weapons. You're going to have basic infantry and outpost capability, and it's basically going to represent the idea that we are sending prefabricated military bases to worlds that are then manned by our forces that we send. Because sending a division is one thing, but also sending the additional heavy equipment that will be able to help protect the world. And so having all these systems is going to be really, really important. And as you can see, I'm naming them after our generals. So we have Stone Cipher, someone suggested that. The Stone Cipher Planetary Interception System, and the Kalinsky Planetary Protection System. And these two systems are going to be mounted in this kind of prefabricated base that we will deploy to new colonies and new frontier outposts that will give them all the protection they need. They'll have basic infantry emplacements and heavy machine guns and mortars and all this kind of stuff, as well as large laser platforms and Gorse close-in weapon defense systems for the planet that can really defend our colonies. As you can see here, the United Terran ship Galactica finishes up CVL-06. You may be asking, where are the other CVLs? Well, that's a mystery for you to find out. CVL-06 Galactica is on the way. And one thing I found out is that I had put on these Canada-class destroyers that we've just built 3 of, the Canada, the Oman, and the Rhodesia. I forgot to build or design the size 1 anti-missile or AMMs for the ship, because they actually do have 8 AMM launchers and a magazine for it, and so none of our Canada ships actually have these on them. So what I'm doing here is I'm designing ourselves these new size 1 missiles that will further supplement the capability of our destroyers to shoot down missiles that are coming in against us. I named them SSM-1B Weasel, and SMM means space-to-space missile, and we're going to cancel off our fusion boosted and start researching those missiles in turn. We also now set up Carrier Strike Group 4. We put the Galactica in there. I'm using Battlestar naming for our carriers, just because they generally have pretty nice names, like the Galactica, the Pacifica. These kind of names are quite catchy and nice, and they can kind of make sense for the universe we're in, right? So I ordered the Red Sea now to go have a look, and we again find further systems that are completely empty, though we are making a lot of progress in charting our galaxy. Remember, there's a lot of really cool things now in 2.1, even though everyone's talking about 2.2, in that there are black holes and other mysteries out there in the galaxy that we are playing on known stars, of course. I also now begin the transfer of SIM-4A missiles to New Eden Colony. We are going to be replacing them with the SIM-4Bs. This is because we're recently going to be unlocking the better warhead technology, which are fusion boosted warheads, and so called, I guess, a fusion reaction in the warheads, a nuclear missile, and that will cut down on the weight of the warhead at the same strength and will allow us to put in more engine. But the big tech that we need to be focusing on after we go for our nuclear pulse engines is going to be the addition of higher power boosted engines. And so that's something that I'm probably going to be looking at, refocusing our efforts on, is getting our power and propulsion technology ahead. We're still about 4 years away, 1988, until we can get ourselves start researching the next level of engine tech, and we will finish up the next level of reactor technology in 4 years. And again, we're sending out our ships to begin exploring the galaxy and seeing what we can find indeed. Here we are on 61 Cygni as we begin to move things around, and Nelson Military Outpost has its first colonists arrive successfully, and that is a moon near our fuel harvesters in the system, where we will put probably a ship or two, and their good job is just to protect the fuel harvesters there. Maybe even put some surface to orbit weapons. It really does depend on the circumstances. I have to take a closer look, of course, later. I'll just start some order of these train stations, because I'm going to realize, okay, we need to start putting these pretty much everywhere. We need them in asteroids, we need them on new worlds, and we just do not have enough of them. They're quite expensive, relatively speaking, so that's definitely something to consider. There are also 2 things that I'm thinking of designing as well, and that I will be designing, and that is going to be a fighter defense base, and then the second thing is going to be a maintenance kind of supply way station. And these 2 things will allow us to keep ships at jump points and in non-planetary space, not above a planet, and that will further extend the coverage of our defense patrols, right? Because there is going to be openings between when we're patrolling ships through and back and when the enemy can attack, because of combat taking in such a quick span of time. And so because of this, I want to put kind of checkpoints and fight defense bases and all this kind of stuff. And so what we've designed here is a station that can have 25 F-8A fighters, about the same as our Akan class carrier, And these fighters are going to be capable of providing defense to local areas, right? 25 fighters that can fire 100 missiles at a target, right? That's really, really strong when you consider if we can just put this as a station, build the station, put all the fighters on the station, and then tug it to the area. That's actually can be really, really effective because we can just move it there, set it up, and then that planet has pretty good defense. The only thing we have to make sure that it has is it got enough maintenance capacity to support all the fighters actually on the station, because the station is using commercial hangars, and commercial hangars do not stop the maintenance clock. But if they're above a planet which has the maintenance support capacity, they do. And so that's one of the benefits of doing it in that way. Here we go, we're redesigning all of our, well, not really redesigning, but we're building the next generation of missiles. So the SIM-4Bs, the SIM-8Bs are going to be the next two missiles that we build, and those are both going to use a slightly larger engine and slightly reduced warhead size with the new fusion boosted warhead technology. And we're also going to be ordering construction of a lot. Now, here we go. Out Proxima Centauri, a massive find occurs. We find a planet that has a breathable atmosphere that is only about 5 billion kilometers away. Now, I was immediately concerned of alien presence because that is very, very much in the habitability area for a non-player race or other alien threat. So we set up a waypoint, and I order the UTS Red Sea, the first of its ships under command of Alfred Peevler, to move towards the target and get ready to launch a deployable electromagnetic and thermal sensor probe to the planet to determine what exactly, if any, alien presence is on the world. I'm hoping that there'll be no alien presence, ideally, because that would mean we are very much in. This is a system that is right next to Lalonid, and this could be a really big find in terms of support and supplying future colonies. This could really be a true Eden, definitely. So I get the buoys ready, and we launch our first buoy. Now I make a mistake, and we actually launched 3 of them, but redundancy. And they go very slowly at 1,000 kilometers per second towards the target, and they're going to obviously deploy right above. So we send them in. They just target, as of course the planet does rotate around, or not rotate, but orbit around the star. You can see that planet down there, Proxima Centauri 1, is so close in. This is actually a very faint star. The star is actually very, very, very weak. So being quite close is the difference. It's only got a luminosity of 0.0045. And the eccentricity of the actual planet, unlike New Eden, is very, 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 very non-eccentric, which means that the temperature variation from distance from the star is very, very little. This means that if we begin terraforming of the planet, the actual work needed to warm the atmosphere up will be pretty consistent. We won't really need to, make sure it's just cold and just hot and kind of tinker around with it. We just need to make it warmer, and it'll be in a really good place. And with these finds, it kind of pushes away from the ideas of maybe we should terraform Mars, maybe we should terraform New Eden. These are all places that we eventually do want to terraform, but it kind of changes the priority. And something that I realize is we're going to need more colony ships, right? Our primary kind of issue at the moment is getting enough people to other worlds so that we can start having them man installations that will be able to maintain our presence further and further afield. So that is really where our kind of chokehold is. That is stopping us quite significantly in terms of expansion. And here we go. I'm building the maintenance space I talked about earlier. And that maintenance space, we're going to build a few of as well. These are pretty expensive, all these bases, but they'll be really useful for further capability. So the probe, the buoys deploy, and we find that there are no aliens actually in the system. And this is just great, fantastic for us. And because of this, I decide, okay, go ahead, geologically survey Proxima Centauri 2, which is the planet of interest. and we are going to start constructing start stabilizing the jump points to the system in question, so that we can begin immediate colonization. It has a starting colony cost of only 0.5, and if we terraform that, which could be very easy, just a little bit, make it a little bit warmer, we could be in a really great place. And what that means is with a colony cost of 0.50, while it may have taken 1 million to support 1 million people, it may take 200 infrastructure on another world for for Proxima Centauri A2, it's only going to take 50 infrastructure. So it's 4 times less costly to begin immediate colonization. Yep, and that's where we're going to end the episode off. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you want to, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.